Hey everyone, welcome into the Apex Insiders GridRival Fantasy preview for the 2025 Chinese Grand Prix. Garrett BFF here. Just want to give you a recap of last week in Australia and then what I'm looking for going into this week in China. So last week was not all that great for me. Uh, just dealt with a lot of drivers who disappointed and DNFs. You had guys like Leclerc and Hamilton, who were on the high side of things, that just didn't really materialize for Ferrari. And I had exposure to a lot of Ferrari. Uh, you also had, say, Oscar Piastri slip down the standings just due to that one bad turn that saw him spun out. And he eventually did recover, but it just wasn't quite enough to increase his fantasy value or even just to keep it par where it was. And of course, Liam Lawson Wreck, Signs, Wreck, Hadjar, Wreck, doing DNF, all these different things that happen with guys that just DNF'd or quite frankly just didn't uh, live up to the standard that they had set for themselves. So a lot of my teams did suffer because of it. I had one team do okay, but the rest I'm kind of starting off on the back foot. And it's disappointing, especially after having a pretty good season in 2024. But it's a long season. A lot can change in between now and then. And if you're like me and you had a rough week one, then that or race one, but that's okay. And if you didn't, if you were the one that had Lance Stroll as a talent driver and played Kimi Antonelli and just all the guys that happen to hit, fantastic. That's great. So let's keep it going strong. All right. So as for this week, if you followed what I had mentioned previously about driver contracts, is you want to have 1 to 2 slots open per race week. So, that's where I was saying like have the high-end drivers be more along the lines of a stock that you hold for a long time. You let it grow, you let it just generate you money over time. And in this case, it's just drivers just getting you points. They may not be going up or down in value much, but they're getting you the much needed points. And you let the other drivers who are a little bit lower give you the value boost, in addition to also trying to get points. If you did take that and you kind of mixed and matched how you have your drivers' contracts work, you should have 1 to 2 spots available. Now, the reason that that is good to have versus just say having all 5 guys on five, 5 race contracts is you can't take advantage of discrepancies as easily as if you do have a couple slots open. Now, you don't want to go too far on the other side where you're just going discrepancies and just, attacking that. Meanwhile, you drop all 5 drivers or even your constructor as well in a given race, and now you've taken, a quarter of the field for drivers anyway, just out of your player pool. You're not allowed to touch those guys because of the one race holdover. So or lockdown, sorry. So that's where having a couple of open spots per week is really good and really useful, is because now you can target guys who are more than likely going to have an increase in value. And those guys could be such as Liam Lawson, could be one. I'm not keen on really playing him just because his value, his price is still 19.6, so he's not talent eligible. But if you're kind of in that no man's land and you're like, I don't really want to go all the way down to say a different driver below the talent driver because I already have, say if you have Carlos Sainz, like I have Sainz in a lot of leagues. If I have Carlos Sainz, I'm not going to like really use, say, Yuki Tsunoda as much because even though he's a good driver and he did struggle a little bit, but like it's not because I doubt his driving skills, it's because the value and how that lines up. So I don't really want to just drop down to Yuki Tsunoda just for the sake of getting off of Lawson. But what I do want to do is I want to try to get up to Lawson in this hypothetical scenario. Instead of going with a Yuki and a Sainz, I would rather go for a Sainz and a Lawson, uh, because his value dropped 2 mil. Now, of course, there's always the chance that he is still overpriced and continues to fall. However, even if he goes up, even if it's marginal, that's still a value increase. And guess what? You can drop him after 1 week. You don't have to make him a 3 to 5 race contract. You can just see if what happens if he has a bounce back in China. So that's one way that you can kind of not manipulate the system, but play the game to get your team the most value possible. Is to, you can get up to Lawson, but you're not really sure about it, so you might drop down. No, don't do that. Try to play the value as much as possible. Another case of that is Fernando Alonso. I do like Alonso this week, especially because he is now further below. Well, actually, he's below. He wasn't below it at all last week, but he is below the talent driver threshold now. So you could potentially get him as a talent driver for 1 to even 2 weeks if his value rises this week. If it goes all the way, 2 million, then we're out of luck. But hey, maybe it goes 1 million. Then you're actually able to use him as a talent driver for 2 different weeks, assuming that he goes up in value the next week afterwards. And it's interesting to say assume value, but in the end, you do want your values to, or sorry, your drivers to increase in value every single week. That's the point of this game. So, no, your drivers will not do that every week, but you don't always want to necessarily play on, say, the worst case scenario. You do need to recognize the worst case scenario, but it's much like for the NFL fans out there, uh, where like, oh, if I where you hear all these different times where like franchises don't play pay players. There we go. Finally got that out, but they don't pay players because for some stupid reason, they're like, well, maybe we could get them cheaper next year if they have a down year. Well, if they have a down year, yeah, that might help you, but and the finances, but if they have a down year, that's not helping you on the field. So why would you not just pay them now when they're a little bit cheaper versus what they could be next year and be even more expensive if they have a good year? Because you want your players to have a good year. So it's that kind of dynamic where, yes, you have to recognize the downside, but you want to assume or play as there is upside there. So that's why I'm saying Alonso is a talent driver for, say, 2 weeks. Going further down the board, just some guys to be aware of. Isaac Hadjar, and if you didn't have him last week, Carlos Sainz and Jack Doohan. Jack Doohan didn't decrease in value that much. It was still 800K versus Hadjar and Sainz falling 2 million. But that is, again, great, great spots to go in and just take advantage of the drop in price because it was a wet race. It was their first, some guys, it was their first time on track or first time in that car. So they're unfamiliar with things that are going on. And it's possible that they could bounce back and gain a lot of value this week. So having those open roster spots in your lineup is going to be key to taking advantage of something like this. Now, for example, if Jack Doohan, and forgive me, you're going to hear some of my mouse clicking. So Jack Doohan, for example, if he was just to, let's say he qualifies 17th, he has a mediocre race, 16. I can't remember if this is a sprint weekend. I don't remember if this is a sprint weekend. Lockdown is on Friday. Okay, so yes, it is in fact a sprint weekend. Let's say he has a mediocre sprint too. 16th. He doesn't beat his teammate, but he finishes the race. 99 points overall. It's not fantastic. It's not a whole lot to write home about. However, last week he only had 70. That is nearly, and that's just if he is absolutely horrible the entire time. Quali, race, and sprint doesn't beat Gasly, or like, assuming Gasly doesn't DNF or anything like that, or get any improvement points. If he just does okay, we're looking at a 30-point increase for Jack Doohan, or nearly a 30-point increase for Jack Doohan. That should increase his value, and that's also at 4.2 million. That's stupid cheap for that kind of value. Uh, so yeah, that's where you need to kind of be aware of how the game works. Where yes, Doohan is cheap. He's not necessarily the best driver out there, so I'll give him some grace. He's still new, but just knowing how the game of Grid Rival is scored, how it's played, can definitely help you spot some values and just say, like, again, just finish the race and just keep it clean, and his value is more than likely going to go up. The same can be said for any of the drivers that I've mentioned so far, with Alonso, Sainz, Hadjar, Lewis is another one, and Leclerc's another. Piastri. I mean, all these guys just finish the race because of, yeah, and where you probably should finish the race, that is, and your value is more than likely going to go up. So we're probably going to see a lot of teams have an increase in value this week. Now, with all that strategy out of the way, just kind of bringing up, hey, so this is what we're looking at. What happened last week? Here's who disappointed, how we can take advantage of that. Now let's see, okay, I've already mentioned a lot of the guys that I like because I want to take a shot at increasing that value of my team. Now, who are some other guys who did or didn't increase their value all that much that I still think is actually are good plays? Number one, you can't go wrong with Verstappen or Lando. Any of the basically top six guys is super safe. Antonelli, yes, he won me over. I wanted to see him on track for the first time, and I had him in one league, and I think that's probably where I did the best. But uh, yeah, so shame on me for doubting, not even necessarily doubting, but just like wanting to sit back and watch. Shame on me for that. But after that, Lawson, I forgot to mention Lawson and the guys when I was just listing off some guys that you could take advantage of the value, potential value. Lawson is another. And then I still like Albon at 13.8. He went up 2 million, so his value is not quite as good as it used to be, but Williams is looking like a really good car. Really good car. Like somehow, well, so does Sauber does too, but somehow they are ahead of, somehow Williams and Sauber are both ahead of Ferrari. I don't expect Sauber to stay there, and I don't expect Williams to stay there. However, the fact that Albon was able to pull up a P5 and Sainz more than likely would have been pretty good had he stayed in that race. We're looking at like say a P5, P8, P7 somewhere in there for Williams, and they're just getting started. They could get better. So, yes, Alvin, I'm still fine with that value at 13.8. Hulkenberg, of course. Hajar, I think that's good to play him this week. Gabriel Bortoleto is an interesting case because he did go up in value and so I mean he kept it clean. He finished the race, but didn't do a whole lot after that. But he might just be kind of like doing where like just play him and he's fine. That might be okay. Now for guys I'm fading, unsurprisingly, Haas. My gosh, Haas was awful. Uh, I believe Ocon and Behrman were the last of the racers to actually finish the race. Looks like Haas has taken a massive step backwards this year after being pretty surprising last year. Behrman finishing in the points in his first race with the team, and it just, yeah, I can't, I can't play Haas this week. Gasly is on the edge for me. I'm not opposed to people playing him, but I'm not sure if I can do it personally. Um, so yeah, like I really don't have a whole lot of fades this week just because there are a lot of guys who saw a decrease in value that I think could easily see their value shoot back up and still score a decent amount of points. Um, so yeah, picking out a fade is not as black and white this week as it was previously. And yeah, especially Haas, that's that's settled. I'm not playing them until they show me something. And I'm sure I'll do what I did with Alpine, what I do with them what I did with Alpine last year, where I faded them, and then they started doing better for like two races, and I was like, all right, I'll play them. I'm in, and then they absolutely crashed and burned. So I'm sure this is going to happen to me again this year. I'm going to try to make sure that doesn't happen, but I'm pretty sure it will, just because we can't help ourselves. We have to get in at some point. It's the FOMO effect for sure. As far as constructors go, basically play who you want among the top four teams. I think Williams is still a great value at 14.6 million. I mean, gosh, I think that's fantastic. Aston Martin is fine. They're a bit in no man's land where they're a bit expensive for their potential points. Granted, they would have had more had Alonso finished, but I still like being able to drop down to, say, Williams in this case, save some money so that I can pay up elsewhere for my drivers. I'm not playing Haas as a constructor. That's off the table. Racing Bulls, I think they'll bounce back. I think they'll be fine just based on their performance. Alpine is another that I'm okay with playing, but I probably won't. And then finally, if you really, really, really need to save money, Sauber was interesting in Australia. That could very well be because of the changing conditions of the race, but whether it's changing conditions or not, you still have to put the car in a spot to score points. And that's exactly what Nico Hulkenberg did. And Bortoletto, again, to his credit, finished the race. He did his job. So I think that they could be a potential value. They could potentially go up even more. Right now, they're at 6.9. They went up 2.1 million. They could go up even more. So if you really want to save some money, try something different, I think you could do worse than that. Well, that is going to do it for me today. Good luck building your lineups on GridRival. Hopefully, you were able to learn something out of all this rambling and nerdy talk on how to play the game of GridRival, the strategy behind it, what you're looking for in a driver slash value play, and all that. And I will see you guys next time. Take care.